Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our second discussion about this disastrous situation of tertiary education institutions in Iran. This program is recorded from the international community of Iranian academics, and I am with my colleague, Dr. Encieh Erfani, to discuss this. This is the second time we are sitting together to examine the present condition of tertiary education in Iran. And the fact that we must return to this subject after a week so soon is itself a sign of how deep and unresolved the crisis had become in Iran. We are all academics and we are recording this session to raise awareness about the severe pressures currently facing students, scholars, and universities in Iran. What we are witnessing is a sustained assault on the conditions that make higher education almost impossible. There is no freedom of thought, there is no access to information, there is no open communication, and there is no ability to remain connected to the wider intellectual world for students in Iran universities today. Among the most demanding tools in this process is the internet blackout. In a setting where education, research, administration, and academic collaboration now depend so heavily on digital access, cutting or crippling the internet is not a technical inconvenience. It's actually an attack on the infrastructure of learning. It isolates students from their classes, scholars from their resources. As we will talk, many of the programs have been stopped. Students' final dissertations have been stopped because they cannot access to any materials or any research. So there are universities in Iran is now blocked from the whole world. In this discussion, we will examine the human, educational, financial, and political consequences of internet blackout, as well as the broader strategy of control that they reflect. They will also consider how students and academics are trying to adapt, endure, and resist even under these conditions that is designed to fragment and silence them. Ultimately, this is a conversation about not only about higher education, about the future of a generation and the preservation of intellectual life in Iran. So without further ado, let's start talking, Encieh, with a question about what does this recurring use of internet blackouts in Iran reveal about the relationship between technological control and authoritarian governance?
Thanks a lot, Negar, for having me this night to talk about more about the situation in Iran, especially the internet blackout that's also affecting the scientific community, scholars, and students in general. Of course, the daily life of the people as well. The point is that the Iran regime has a really long story in really blockouting the internet and also not having the access to the new technologies. That we remember that in our childhood times, that even having the video players in Iran was forbidden, even during the after the revolution in Iran, that I was not even born, but I heard from the parents that even having the cassettes and also the recordings of the some songs of the previous regime was forbidden in Iran. So they were controlling even the cars and sometimes of the homes, that if you have the video player or if you have special videos, that maybe there were also the family videos, but having that instrument to play with, that was forbidden. And later on, we realized that after the satellites that could become one of the communication for the people, we heard a lot from the Iranian regime that they were even coming to the homes without having the permit, entering to the homes, going to the roofs, trying to destroy all these instruments, and still having the satellites in Iran is part of the crime. So although they cannot really control that one, but if you have it, it can also consider as a crime object having with you. So the regime of Iran always try to forbidden the communication and the right of the communication for people. And of course, internet also was one of them. Although the Iranian regime is proud of that, the Institute for Fundamental Science in Iran, that called that as IPM, was the first institute. So it was the Institute for Physics and Mathematics, and later on they changed its name for the Institute for Fundamental Sciences, was the center that started having their access to the internet for the academic community of Iran, because IPM is the first institute of, let's say, that established almost 30 years ago to really have the fundamental science in Iran. So they were really proud that they started from that time, in the time of Rafsanjani, the former president of Iran. But unfortunately, later on, they realized that, internet connection can also help the communication of the people with outside of the world. And after that, later on, in last 10, 15 years that we see the progress of the social media, many countries, especially the totalitarian countries, including Iran, they were always aware that, with this kind of the communication, not whole world, whole society can even communicate with the outside world. It's not just academics, it's not just students that they can just communicate with emails or exchanging with their colleagues. Now all the people by having that account in the social media, they can communicate freely. They can even find friends, and also they can see the daily life of the other people, that how the life going in the outside of Iran, especially for the teenagers and the Generation Z that we hear a lot about them. So they share their daily life and how freedom that they have. And of course, the Iranian teenagers also see such kind of the life. So that's why for years that we hear that the regime of Iran always try to use the technologies just to forbid and also not having the access to the Iranian people, and of course importing such kind of the instruments and such kind of the technologies from the specific countries, especially China. And now we see that becoming more severe. But the first completed blackout of the internet in Iran happened in 2019 in October, when the protests happened in Iran. So the regime for the first time blocked out the internet for 5 days. And those days I was in Iran, I was a faculty member then, and I remember completely that I was staying in my office, and we didn't really know that what's going on, because we couldn't even open the internal accounts in Iran. So then even the website of the university, my email belonging to the university was completely blocked out. So you didn't have any access to outside of the world. I'm not even talking about social media, because for long years in Iran, even these kind of the social media like Telegram, WhatsApp, Instagram, YouTube, all these channels were completely blocked out. So you just could have an access to these websites and social media just by having the VPN. And unfortunately, with the regime of the Iran, even having the VPN is part of the crime. So buying and selling of a VPN is part of the crime. So even these days, they make it as that, if because the internet is blocked out, and with the VPN you can have access to such kind of the websites and such kind of the social media for exchanging the information. Even having the VPN in your phone could be considered as a crime of the spying for foreign countries. So that could be a really be a big punishment for you if you have access to such kind of the issues. And we also recently hear that even people that they have an Starlink, because we know that Starlink could help you to have internet access without being able to connect to the national channels. We hear that many of them have been arrested, especially after the war that happened in June last year. Many people that they have that access to the Starlink have been arrested. Even after the massacre that happened in Iran in January 8 and 9, we also hear that when the regime blocked out the internet, they blocked out by the purpose to really controlling that the ones that they have an access to the Starlink, and trying to find the hubs of the Starlink. And many of them have been arrested, and many of them that they were in the trade of the Starlink, because they always import these kind of the instruments illegally to the Iran. So many of them really get worried about situation. And unfortunately, a few weeks ago, we even hear that they arrested a person just because of the Starlink, but just by chance, because they were looking for another person in that home, and they realized that they have a Starlink in that house, and the person who was the father of two children, he has been beaten, and unfortunately he has passed away, so under the torture. So this means that having an access to the internet by any instrument, being able to have a VPN or even have an access by Starlink, could be considered as a crime, but right now by the rules of the Islamic Republic. And that becomes a really, really severe situation, that how it could be that, because before we heard when I was a child, having a video player could be considered as a crime and you could be prison. But there were few families that they have an effort to buying such kind of instrument. But these days, all the people have an access to the internet, especially with their cell phones. And how it could be that you consider all the people as doing some criminal act, by just having the VPN or just having an access to the internet. So whatever is happening in Iran is becoming really, really severe condition because it could be considered as a crime and it could have a punishment later on.
A couple of points that I also noticed that is happening is that there's a shift of strategy. So when you were talking about 1980s and 1990s, the whole discussion of Islamic Republic was about westernization, how to stop the youth to follow Western ideas and how to block them away from not doing that. But also they wanted to monopolize the news. So they wanted to tell people what's happening in the country themselves rather than people. It seems to me that this time it is more about the fear that they have, particularly after January 8 and 9, after those 2 big days of the large demonstration. They have been really terrified of opening the internet because there are many other countries in the world who have been in this situation of conflict and they have never went through this national blackout. Today that we are talking is the 86th day of this blackout. They can't access to WhatsApp, Google. There's no website they can access. They don't even get connected to internet. Yesterday, I was reading that the Supreme National Security Council in Iran passed as the result in response to some of the complaints from the public about this internet blackout, they issued a statement saying that this is because of the war situation and because of security situation, and we want to identify people who want to plan for the assassination of the officials. But this resonates of what you were just explaining, that the danger of this situation is that not only you get arrested, but also you can be targeted as somebody who betrayed the country, a traitor to your country, and this can be execution without even a fair trial. I mean, we both know, and we're going to talk about this at some stage, about how the Islamic Republic executes without any fair trial in general. But I think, as you said, this makes a serious human rights concern for all the activists and scholars, because this shows how the Islamic Republic now is using it as a tool to silence, and particularly silence, universities. Now, we're going to talk more about these issues during our talk, but let's focus on universities. So, let's talk about what has been the impact. How has it reshaped university as an institution of knowledge? I mean, they don't want them to go back to universities because they're terrified of students being together or gathering campus together, or some kind of um, demonstration starts, of some kind of opposition ignites again, as it always has in Iran through universities. But I wonder if you would like to give some comments about what has it impacted universities as the place of knowledge, both as scholars, and what kind of challenges or problems we see in university institutions that have been risen as the result of this state policy.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point because we always know that the regime of Iran always controlling the universities in a really terrible situation. That also affects also the how the faculty members and students having access to the internet, because they can control everything that you how which emails you are sending, who is contacting you through the emails, which website you are checking out. So it is always in the control of the system of the university, which is not the case in the case of the other universities outside of Iran, because we know that, of course, when you become a member of any faculty, any university, you get the affiliation of that university and specific ID assigned to that institute, because that becomes one of your prestigious situation, that you are affiliated with any university as a student or any scholar, so you can use the platform, the digital platform of that university. But the point is that this information is completely secure. Nobody can really spy you through that. And if something like that happen, even if your information gets lost or any technical issue, the university should be responsible for the service that they are giving to you. But unfortunately, we were always aware as the students and faculty members that it's better use academic emails. If you are, want to send something private, if you are sending something personal or whatever, even in our PCs at the university, we should not have the, personal information. By personal, I mean having some, contracts, some pictures or whatever that we were worried that maybe in future could be used against us, because we will not really know that who are going to have access to our, even our PCs, because of course the university computer center and IT center could always control you. So we were always cautious in the universities that, even if I'm going to YouTube, for example, if it was open by the university access, I'm not allowed to watch any video that I want to watch. I should be really careful, about, I cannot, for example, checking that what's the difference of the democracy and totalitarian regime, looking for YouTube videos to give me an information or whatever. So we were always cautious about such kind of the things, but not the point is that what's happened in Iran is that it's not just the internet blackout. The regime of the Iran also blocks also the other connections as well. We know that during the war in June also, even the phone calls blackout. So nobody could call us from Iran, and not we cannot even call that our families that they are inside of Iran right now. So it's exactly the same thing. After the days, after more than a month, the connections from the Iran was possible, although it's not stable anymore, and also you cannot talk more than a few minutes. And sometimes you realize that when we are talking about critical things, that the connection completely shut down. And also we don't have an access for our families to call them back. So the point is that with the internet shut down, we are also losing that access. And the other also point is that when we are saying that internet is blocked out, means that the website with the Iranian, ID also got IP also gets lost access to them. So now many of the universities' website, even the scientific websites, are not accessible from outside of the country. So as an scientist that you want to collaborate with your people, or if you want to check their websites or homepage or whatever, any information, you cannot get access to that. So that's one of the reasons is that cause that Iranian scientific community are completely separated from outside of the world. So nobody really knows that as a scholar what you are doing inside the country. And the other also point is that right now, unfortunately, the regime of Iran give an access to the internet for the faculty members. It's not really clear that if all the faculty members get this access, because universities are Iran in different, they are public and private university. It seems that all of the public university faculty members, they get an access to the internet. So, but although they should pay for that, it's much expensive than the normal internet that they were paying before, but they have an access. But the point is that the students, even the graduate students that they are working on their projects and really need the internet, they don't have access to that. And the other also point is that when you are losing your affiliation with the university, when you are graduated, you don't have the such kind of the connection to the university. So that is how, although you are in the process of the transition of applying for another academic position as a student, you don't have an access to the internet. And I imagine that as a student also, you don't even have a job, and your family also cannot afford for you to buying the really expensive internet access. So the point is that in Iran, the regime is not saying that you cannot be blocked internet. They are saying that you can have access to the internet if you pay more. And also this making the really big hierarchy among the poor people and also rich ones, that they can access to the internet. That's the right in the other countries, that even we see that having the access to the free internet is something really normal, that you can, even in the cities, in the buses, in the transportations, everywhere you can have an access to the internet. But in Iran, if you even want to check your email, because Google is completely blocked out, Gmail is blocked out. Maybe some people that they have been traveled to China experience that, because they're also, having an access to such kind of the website is completely blocked out. That in Iran also exactly the same things happening right now. And also the infrastructure inside of the system also is not well structured, because in China there are more than 1 billion people that they're still having the internet that's working very well for them. For all these people, they have their own social media and all these platforms. But in Iran regime, although invested too much budget for all these kind of the things, but unfortunately these platforms are not even functioning well. And of course, the Iranian people, they don't have trust to these platforms, because they are completely aware that their information, whatever it is, will gonna be traced by the regime, and in later on it could be also considered against them, because in some cases, we also hear that they could even have an access to WhatsApp and Telegram communications of people, and because of these communications, they put the crime on them because of these private messages that's happening. So that is how even if these platforms were also ready, the Iranian people they don't really trust of them, and but unfortunately, when they are forced, and all the international platforms for communication are blocked out, many of them really transferred, gradually to these platforms that unfortunately becoming that the situation is becoming normalized in Iran because the regime is saying, okay, if you want to have an access for communication, these are the platforms and go and use them. And nobody really knows that how they're going to use this information against you. If they really in future they could be able to trace them because they are collecting the data and they can analyze the data to trace the people who what they are doing in such kind of the platforms.
Yeah, we also hear, all of us in the international community of Iranian academics, we hear from our connections, our previous students, our colleagues, that many graduate students cannot finalize their projects, cannot graduate because they cannot see what's happening. There is a condition for some of the PhD degrees in Iran that you have to have a publication, international publication, to finalize your degree and graduate. Well, that's not possible. Those of them who applied for another university outside Iran, as you mentioned, they have no way of knowing whether their application is in process, they are accepted or not accepted. Um, Academics, although we're going to talk about Iranian academics in Iran, many of them have been very heavily monitored, and but what it is that academics also are cut off from understanding from knowing where is the next conference they can attend to, how can they connect to the international community of scholars. I mean, many of us thrive in our careers because we are connected to international community, and that is a very tragic point for Iran's tertiary education, that it's now completely cut off. So it's the matter of publication, it's the matter of progress. Then, as far as I understand, every promotion processes is dependent on these international collaborations. So all the promotion processes have stopped. Um, and the students are in limbo. These are the most fruitful and energetic years of their life, and they need to get graduated and start to work, and they can't because they are stuck in it. Now, we talked about 86 days. This is now almost 3 months that this complete blackout has continued, which means if you are graduating, you can't even complete your dissertation to finalize it, and that is 3 months of your time that is gone. So this is a very, very dramatic situation, and I still don't know how. We still don't know how would be the psychological impact of these troubles on the students. But let's focus more on the students and talk about the layer form of harms. Now, I want us to explore how the internet blackouts produce this layer form of harms to students, like educational harms we talked a little bit about. There is economic, psychological, and of course, political harms that we are very concerned about. But you also mentioned in your talks about the internet apartheid, the class system that the government and the National Security Council has produced by this internet access, and about the expenses and the implications of these harms on the students. So I look forward to your comment, Encieh, on that.
Yeah, actually, when we are saying that the internet is blocked out in Iran for 86 days, we are not considering that. The internet blackout happened in Iran after the massacre in January 8 and 9. When we are talking complete blackout, we are meaning after the February 29 when the war started in Iran. So from that day, there was no access to the internet at all. But before that, even also the internet connection in Iran was not really stable. So whenever the protest happened, whenever the regime realized that maybe having that access to internet could be problematic, so they will cut down even locally for some local places in some specific cities. So we could say that even from January, when the protest started, let's say late December, because it started around 26, 7 December, the protest started. From that day, the connection to the internet was not really stable, especially if you wanted connected from outside, from these social media connections as well. So from that day, we could say that the whole, up to now, we are in more or less in the end of the May. So 5 months passed from the year 2026. So the Iranians almost, lost the internet connection for 5 months of a whole year, that they were not really in a situation of having access to that, because even after the massacre that happened that I mentioned, it was also blocked, and also it was not really functioning very well. The VPNs that they were functioning before, now it was not functioning, so it becomes much more difficult to have an access to outside of the world. But as I mentioned, at least the internet inside the country for the internal websites and all these platforms were functioning well. But after all these things that happened in the country during the war, that we see that it becomes more severe. And now, unfortunately, we are in the 86th day, and regime always saying that we are in the war condition. That's their excuse. But we know that the war just lasted for 39 days, and now we have 46 days that ceasefire happened without any problem, but still the regime is blocking the internet. So it's not just a problem of the war and the security, it's the systematic the situation that's happening inside the country. And just yesterday, the person who is also responsible in the committee of the social activities in Iran, of virtual media in Iran, mentioned that we bought these instruments and this technology for blocking of the internet years ago from China. So they are still using that. So it was clear that the regime of Iran always talking about, this hierarchical internet for years, and they're just trying to normalize the situation, trying to put this narrative in the society that, okay, some specific community, like, I don't know, businessmen, some people that they are journalists, the ones that they are the faculty members or the university, can have an access to the internet in general, but normal people, they cannot have an access to that. So they were trying to normalize this situation, especially as I mentioned in 2019, when the first time in the history of the country we realized that they have a power, and they have also the tools to block out the internet completely. So that started from those days, and gradually they trained how to make it in a really more global way, and they see that how the internet blockade will affect also their internal activities as well, because the government of Iran also have an access, to the business, to the international community. So this internet blockout also is going to affect also their activities as well. So gradually they try to see that how they can block out the internet for bigger community, but still they can have the channels for specific people, just to transfer the narrative that the regime wants that. So we know that many journalists that they are supporting the regime, all the member of the parliament, all the authorities of the regime, connected people to the regime, all of them have access to the really normal internet and with high speed. Even a few years ago, we even hear that the tourists that they are traveling to the Iran, they can have a specific SIM card that they can have access to the international internet. That Iranians were not allowed to have such kind of the connection, just to showing to the tourists that you see Iran is really normal and ordinary country, and all the people have access to international connection. But that was not true. So they were just specific SIM cards for tourists. So all of this process happened gradually, and I'm sure that the regime was always looking for a situation to really establish such kind of issue, because we heard for years that they are making their own special platforms similar to Telegram and WhatsApp and all those kind of the thing, even in Instagram. And we now they are gradually they are trying to shift such kind of the narrative inside of the country, going to the direction of the, as I said, what happened in China, more or less happening inside of the Iran right now, with this exception that not the platforms, even the internet platforms are not really well established to really give the the needs that the people are demanding from this kind of the communication. And of course there is no trust for this regime because it could be considered as a crime for your activities.
Yes, I wanted to mention a couple of things. So first of all, is that there is a there is a major intertwine. Like students do not really live in isolation. So the harms that you talked about, that is more that is about society, is actually intertwined in the student's life. A blackout. That kind of started, as you mentioned, as a technical restriction. It all of a sudden becomes an educational loss, financial stress, psychological strain, political exclusion, all at once. So as students are experiencing all of that, one of those issues that I noticed quite recently that is increasing is the economic situation of students. So many students in Iran during their university time, they worked on the platform of Instagram. And Instagram, they either had online shops, which actually made a good income for them, well, relatively good, like they could survive, but also connected them to diaspora, many who could help or needed those instruments or the products, they would buy them. So it was a way for them to make a little bit of money during the time of studies. Many of them did online tutorials on Instagram. Many of them kind of had an access to some kind of financial opportunities. So we mentioned internet blackouts. Even if you do have this apartheid opportunity to buy internet, you also have to buy VPNs. So that's another cost. And then you have to buy another type of, so two to three costs that you have to incur in order to be able to get to Instagram. And because now Iran has an internet blackout, there is nobody else on Instagram. There are only few people of Iran, so you lose your audiences, you lose your market, and this has been had a detrimental effect on the students who some of them have to live in cities with very high prices. The inflation is very high in Iran. Even eating some piece of bread and egg is a mission these days. So with all of this high cost, they all of a sudden lost their source of income. And I can just imagine how dramatic and drastic this is for students. So the other thing is that they were connected intellectually with each other and they were connected intellectually with diaspora. Many of us worked in different platforms, not necessarily political, but even in ICOYA, we did have classes for microbiologies. We had some kind of analysis of data. So data analysis, this would help them to connect it to new form of technologies, new form of topics. All of them are gone. And I think this is hardly ever being noticed. In addition to this internet kind of class system that they have created, which not only puts them into a very drastic economic situation, but also creates a major inequality that creates a sense of injustice among many of the students I have been in contact with. And I can see that this is very, very problematic since Amartya, since he has a capability approach, and he argues that freedom should be understood in terms of what people are actually able to do and become. So if internet blackouts, in fact, reduces capabilities simultaneously, they not only restrict learning and earning and communication, and also participating. Another useful lens that we can think about it is the social suffering theory, which emphasizes that political and structural harm are experienced through daily life, which is now the situation in Iran. So every day they wake up, nothing has changed. Many of them have lost the source of income and the source of education. So we think that this is major, create an urgency, definitely. Now, Encieh, I want to end our discussion with a question about the state. So if you think that the regime in Iran rely on internet shutdowns, but what does this tell us about the fear of organization or fear of transparency and generational agency among the students and academics?
As I mentioned, the regime always have the fear of the technology or whatever that could give the information from outside life to the people of Iran. It started from, normal cassettes that you could not get information from outside, even the new songs that they were outside of the world. So our generation were not even familiar with kind of these songs. After that, the videos that shows that how the normal life could be outside the world, because we know that in Iran, even the videos and films, all these things completely reached out by the censorship, and we were even the story also of the movies also have been changed by the narrative of the regime. And that started from those days. And after that, by the internet, they also realized that that could be also really, really dangerous for them. So the censorship is always happening in Iran. It's not just happening by these social instruments. It also happens by the books as well, because we know that not all of the books could be translated in Iran. You cannot write any book that you want. So there is always censorship in all aspects of the life that regime can control on that. So that's also part of the internet as well. But I'm just wondering that how they can really continue with this anger that's happening inside of the society, because when you are saying to your people that you don't have a right, or you don't have a capacity, or you don't have some such how the maturity to have an access to the internet, it just gives them too much anger, that why I should not have an access to that. And that, as also we mentioned, that it's also happening hierarchically. It's not just happening for all the people, like something like China, that all the community, they don't have access to the internet. In Iran, just the ones that they are close to the regime, that the ones that they are transferring the narrative of the regime, just have an access to the internet. And even the free internet for them, because they are somehow helping the regime to really show what's happening inside the country, but its own narrative. So that's how they can even have an access to the really high speed internet and completely free. So that's how the anger also increasing in the country. You also mentioned the good point regarding that the internet and also having access to social media was one of the income resources for the students. I also remember that before summer in June, that internet blackouts happened in Iran really severely. From those days, I was even participating in some of the online courses from Iran, because they were really, really great courses, really great teachers. I passed some art courses, from the platforms inside of Iran. So it was really helpful for me, because as a person living outside, I could pay higher. And it was really also helpful for them economically, because the price that I'm paying comparing with the currency of the country, for me was almost nothing. So I was available to pay more. And also many of us were also the members of the some of the activities related to the culture, related to the literature in Iran, with the social medias like Telegram and WhatsApp. We were in many such kind of the groups, all the Iranians in diaspora. So we were helping each other by participating in these classes, in this group, in this community, to really increase the knowledge. But the point is that now, since they were based in Iran, so they were blocked out. And even if they were based outside the country, now the Iranian audiences, they cannot have access to that. You mentioned about online courses of the international community of the Iranian academics. More than 80% of our participants was students from inside of Iran. Now, unfortunately, we lost this kind of the audiences, so we cannot continue such kind of the education for them. So that's becoming something really, really terrible situation. And also because of the economical situation in Iran, we were aware that many students, they will also could have the remote jobs, by internet access. It was also really great for them, because they could get they could have an access to the bigger platform, to bigger community, to big companies, by working for them to amplify their CV profile. And also they could also earning, but not by Iranian currency, but by dollar, and also to be able to help their families, and also supporting their own life as well. But not all of these, connections, and all of these remote works also just gone. And many of them, they were working in marketing, they were working in web designer, the ones that they were really connected to the internet access. And not all of them have gone, because as you mentioned, many of these shops are happening in Instagram, so they were using many people for marketing and all this stuff. So now if you don't have your audiences, so they are not active there, so you don't really need such kind of the people to help that. So that's how the life of the people has been really affected by blackout of the internet. And the other also issues that even the online courses, online study in Iran also is not functioning very well, because as I said, from January that the universities has been shut down in Iran, the regime said that we had an experience of COVID, so we can transfer to the online classes. But those days, at least the connection in Iran was almost stable and internet was not that expensive. Now, even that platform is gone. And many of the students, they don't really learning very well. And the other also point is that not all the courses could happen online. Some of the students, they are working in the subject that they do want to do experiment. So you need to go to the labs to do such kind of the experiment. And although the war has stopped more than 46 days right now in Iran, but unfortunately, the regime is not opening the universities that the students can at least can have access to the normal education, because as you said, they are also worried about the protests that could happen. So, and also the other also issues that in Iran, some of the universities are private universities. So you pay for these universities, but unfortunately, you don't have an access to the education that you were paid for that. So that's why there's a big complaint right now, and the students saying that we didn't really receiving the information that we paid for that. And the other also issues that even that happens from the students, not just the university students, that now we are approaching the exams times in Iran. In June the exams will start, and the universities and also the other school teachers saying that the exams will gonna happen in person. And now all the students are complaining that, okay, the level of the education that we receive is not really enough that we could be able to do the in-person exams. So now it becoming also big conflict right now, that how the exams is gonna happening in person, although the education was happening online, but not really in a really good way. So the situation in the case of the Iran is really, really terrible. And also you mentioned about the applications of the students. I'm sure that the Iranian students in all the levels, they lost the applications for the academic year, because all of the peak of the applications for many universities in many countries was around January, and the internet blackout from that time. And many of, if you have any statistics from many universities all around the world, you will see that the number of the applicants from Iran may be just limiting to zero, because they were not having access to submit their application on time. And of course, as you mentioned, many of them, they applied for positions, they applied they submitted their papers, their research results, and they're waiting for the reviews and whatever, and they don't have access to the internet to be able to review and also to follow up what's happening to that. So whatever is happening is somehow separating the Iranian scientific community from whole world. And as you mentioned, the psychological and political pressure that they are facing by that it's not just the books that you are not allowed to read, that the censorship that happening around. Now even you don't have an access to whole world. You don't even know what's going on. And you are also worried economically that, shall I watch this YouTube video with the budget I spend for that? Shall I spend my money for going to this course, or shall I do that or not? Because now you should really think also from economical point of view that which website you should click to open to see that if you're going to get benefit from that. So it becomes the everyday choice for you, that how you are going to use the internet. That for us is something really, it's always accessible, and it's really becoming every day cheaper and cheaper to have an access to the internet. But unfortunately, in Iran, it becoming expensive and expensive, and also it becoming more hierarchical for the people. Not all the people can have an access to that.
Yeah, sure. I also think that the reliance of the states on internet shutdown suggests that the states still sees the students and academics and universities as a source of organization, critique, challenge of their legitimacy. That's why they have intensified these moments of political tension, because they're not only trying to block information, they also try to interrupt the formation of the coordination of agency and generational agency. So that the in effect, this blackout reveals the fear of the regime of a connected public, something that they have always been very worried about. Although I think that they are not going to be successful, because internet blackouts are a tactical delay. It's not really a sustainable political situation. They might be able to interrupt coordination and hide repression for a little bit, but they don't resolve the underlying grievances that produce resistance in the first place. We have seen this coming up and up again. Blackouts do not eliminate dissent. They often confirm it. People are angrier now than they were before. When a regime like Iran cuts communication, in fact, it is showing fear and weakness rather than confidence, which is also can deepen public anger and reduce legitimacy over time. So they might be getting along with it for a very short time, but over time, it's not going to work. This is a classical authoritarian overreach problem, which means that coercion might be suppressing some visible mobilization, but it also exposes the regime's dependence on force rather than the consent of people, which is the source of legitimacy. Now, the blackout also damages regime's own society and economy. Of course, we have reports from the prolonged shutdowns in Iran describes harm to businesses, unemployment. Government is now kind of in a panic, doesn't know how to respond to this. It disrupted trade and weakens productivity, which shows that it has a very high cost for the regime. And this matters politically, because I think the regime that erodes livelihood, especially among students, workers, and the middle class, often accelerates the very dissatisfaction that they are actually trying to contain by this internet blackout. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is that the internet shutdowns cannot permanently block any information. Even in the severe blackouts, Iranians and outside observers, they all continue to find some kind of partial channels through satellite tool, messaging gaps, or indirect reporting, or even the word of mouth, which means that the regime rarely controls the full narrative. In authoritarian studies, this is a limit of what James Scott would call domination. The state can thin out communication, but it cannot fully extinguish hidden network, alternative stories, or even social memory. So if you have been the listener to our program, thank you very much for listening to us. Please be the voice of students. See the pressure that the regime puts on the students and tertiary education. We are very grateful for your care and the attention you pay to this matter. We will come back to you next week with another program to highlight the condition of the tertiary educations in Iran. Thank you for listening to us.
Thanks a lot, Negar.
Thank you, Encieh. Thank you for joining the program.